Robin Hood Radio presents Stage Right or Not with Michele Willens. Michele is a longtime journalist and herself is a published playwright of several theatrical works. She's a frequent contributor to the Huffington Post, Daily Beast, and the Atlantic websites.
Another opening of another show.
Well, sadly, death is the big story of this past week. Yes, lights on Broadway dimmed over the weekend for Angela Lansbury. She captivated Hollywood in her youth, became a Broadway musical sensation in middle age. Just think Sweeney Todd, Gypsy, and Mame. And then enchanted us as a widowed mystery writer on the television series Murder, She Wrote. She was a winner of 5 Tony Awards, her final one being for Blithe Spirit in 2009 when she was 83. She was awarded, belatedly, frankly, the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Tonys this last year, but was not able to attend. Well, that was our first indication. I saw her speak about 4 or 5 years ago. She was absolutely delightful, but it was very clear she could not remember many names of shows and people. But the mesmerized and besotted audience would help her out. She was truly a beloved star of all mediums, and she will be missed. Now, another death of sorts was announced, and this about the end of a show. Yes, as I've been predicting, A Strange Loop, the winner of this year's Tony Award for Best Musical, will close on Broadway on January 15th. Now, that's been a run that kind of reflects the industry's ongoing pandemic-related struggles, but also the challenges of marketing a first show by a previously unknown writer, and the show dealing with complex, not particularly relatable issues. Anyway, it's been a strange history for that loop. Now, a very old show that manages to always remain relatable is Death of a Salesman, which I saw this week at the Hudson on Broadway. Now, I've seen this Arthur Miller work multiple times. I dare say the version Mike Nichols did, that was the last one on Broadway, with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Andrew Garfield, brought me to tears. The new version, starring a spectacular Wendell Pierce and Sharon D Clark as Willie and Linda Lohman, is of course very powerful. But there are some directorial choices, very unlike Mike Nichols, by the way, veering into almost a supernatural mode at times, with some odd lighting and other choices. Still, the production is extremely long, maybe that's why, a bit over 3 hours, and as it should be, very, very mournful. The audiences know what they're in for, and they're going home satisfied, if not particularly cheery. Let me just say I cannot imagine those actors ever having to do this twice in a day, let alone 7 times a week. Wendell Pierce is one of my favorite actors. Well, I was also able to see another one of my favorite actors, Reed Birney, at the Irish Repertory Theatre, where he is starring with his son Ephraim in Chester Bailey. And this one started out there in the Berkshires, ran Great Barrington. It's a creatively structured 2-man piece about trauma, medicine, the shame of not serving in World War II, what mothers do to try to protect sons, infidelity, Walt Whitman, and mostly imagination and the brain. Does that sound like a lot to stuff into 90 minutes? Well, it's probably too much. But there's some good writing here. She looked like what Donna Reed would look like if she wasn't Donna Reed. If there's one thing reality can't tolerate, it's competition. Yes, some good lines here. And this father and this son hold our attention and make the visit worthwhile. Again, that's at the Irish Repertory Company. Meanwhile, the United Solo Festival is continuing at Theatre Row on 42nd Street. Now, if you're interested in edgy, creative, and not always easy work, the prices are right, and you may be catching something or someone who will be better known in the future. I caught one last week called Fantastic Mr. S by a very energized Edu Diaz. The United Solo Festival runs through November. Now, one of the shows coming is called The Shot. Now, I have seen that one elsewhere. It's performed by Sharon Lawrence, who you will recognize from television. It has to do with the unexpected death of the husband of Katharine Graham. That one, by the way, was just honored with what else? It was honored by the Berkshires Critics. So there, it just got their award for Best Solo Performance. Finally, I've had a huge dose. I might have said this last week. I've had a huge dose, as many of us have had, of anti-Semitism in the arts world lately. On stage, of course, we have Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt, then David Strathairn's one-man piece called Remember This, which I reviewed last week. On television, 6 hours of Ken Burns' documentary on the U.S. and the Holocaust. I just watched one of the new episodes of The Good Fight, the legal show that I love, and there was Alan Cummings as Eli Gold, a man targeted for assassination because he is a Jewish man. Oh, I even caught a new exhibit at the Historical Society here on how the American Jewish Committee had a march against anti-Semitism in America. All this being said, the Alliance for Jewish Theaters just held its always excellent annual 2-day conference. It ends today, but much of it is recorded, and the talks are always worth listening to. Again, that's the Alliance for Jewish Theaters. So, Jill, on that happy note, I'm on for another week of a busy fall season.
And what are you finding out there? I'm separate and apart. What's the energy like compared to what we were talking about in UK?
On Broadway?
Mm-hmm. Well, you remember we were talking about...
Exactly. I'd say very good. When I went to The Death of a Salesman, the theater was almost completely filled, and that's a hard one. It's a 3-hour depressing show. It's all black cast. I don't even know if I mentioned that. So it does get a diverse audience, and I was happy to see that. On the other hand, you could go to the ticket booth and get a half-price ticket, as you can for most dramas. I mean, I know we talked about A Strange Loop, but let's face it, dramas have a hard time on Broadway, even in the best of times. In a time when fewer tourists are coming to town, or if they come to town, God, they want to see something cheery, and happy and sing-songy.
Right,
So
I always go back to, remember what opened right after 9/11. And that was Mamma Mia.
Yeah,
and people were very, it's just a welcome respite from the. It's nothing like something a little uplifting.
That's right. They're going to see Six. You won't see that on the list. You won't see MJ. They're going to see Michael Jackson, not the one who wrote Strange Loop, the real Michael Jackson. No, so it's a challenge for these dramas, and they're limited engagements. I think Death of a Salesman is certainly a limited engagement. I'm going to see a couple others this week. Cost of Living, I believe. Raisin in the Sun is at the Public. They're not for everybody, so it's a hard time to produce for Broadway. It's a hard time to find investors who think they're going to make money back. It's a moment. I would say this is a moment for so many reasons.
See, really, I would think that, and this is where, again, my mind is sort of different, I should say, than others. I would think that finding literally something cheerful, I'm perhaps being too facile, but just something, some no-brainer that we know people love would. It'd be the first thing I did. If I ruled the world, that'd be the first thing that I did.
Yeah, if you were an investor, I asked a producer who's actually very successful. She has a show on now that's a success, and she said it will take a lot to get her to do another Broadway show. The prices have become so prohibitive, the cost of everything. Some of that is COVID-driven, how they had to change theaters, how they have to take care of precautions. There's a lot of reasons why, but she said a show that she made for, I don't know, $12 million would now be $20 million. So, this is a complicated issue. It's why there are a lot of solo shows, which I keep talking about every week. I'm writing an article now about solo shows. They're cheap. They can be great, but boy, there are a lot of them. And let's face it, those are low-budgeted shows. So a lot is going on. As for sitting in the audience, I looked around at Death of a Salesman, and I saw people who were totally enraptured. I didn't see anybody walk out. I saw people leave with tears in their eyes. There are still theater lovers, and they're going for the good stuff. I hope shows like that get remembered. This is October. It'll have a limited run, and the Tonys don't even start nominating till April. And there are a lot of shows opening this fall, and I hope they're remembered, but I guess they will be, because I assume the actors of Wendell Pierce and Sharon D Clark are going to get nominated. But you don't know. That's a lot of months away that they have to remember.
Yeah, that was always that was always an issue. But what I'm wondering is whether limited runs, and that so many more limited runs have opened up in the last few years for obvious reasons, for the very financial reasons that we've been talking about. And prior to that, how much prior, you would open and expect to have a longer run where you would be open in time for people to remember be remembered for the Tonys.
That's right. By the way, Sharon D Clark, who is going to get nominated for and could win for Best Actress for Death of a Salesman, did not win last year. She did get nominated for Caroline or Change, but she didn't win, and she should have. And one reason voters that I spoke with, they said they couldn't remember it. It was such an early, short run. It was so distant in their memory. Now, hopefully that's not going to happen a second time to her. Who knows? She actually sings a little in this one, too. No, that is, I asked a Tony voter, I said, God, you're going to all these shows now. Leopoldstadt, that's a limited run. I said, are you going to remember this in April? She said, it's always like this. She claims that, 20 shows open in the fall, 20 more in the spring. So I guess it's really about memory, their own memories.
Stage Right or Not with Michele Willens, produced in the studios of Robin Hood Radio, robinhoodradio.com.